Today we're going to be looking at another one of Jesus' miraculous miracles of Jesus walking on water. And on Monday we saw him help with people's physical needs, but today Jesus is going to be focusing more on trust. So what did Jesus teach Peter and the other disciples to do in times of trouble? We're going to be in Matthew chapter 14 today. Our first question is, what did Jesus do when Peter and the other disciples were in trouble? We're going to be in verse 22, and we're going to start reading there. Immediately, Jesus made the disciples get into the boat and go ahead of him to the other side, while he dismissed the crowd. And so this miracle actually is right after feeding of the 5,000. So then we see him after this. Jesus sent the disciples to the boat to go ahead of him, and he's dismissing the crowd. So we see that in verse 22. He's trying to get the crowd to go home, and the disciples are already on the boat to go to the other side. We then see verse 23. After he had dismissed them, he went up on a mountainside by himself to pray. Later that night, he was there alone. So after Jesus had sent the disciples on the boat, he sent all the people home, he stayed there on the mountain and he prayed by himself. We now see a problem start to arise in verse 24. And the boat was already considerable distance from land, buffeted by the waves because the wind was against it. So that word buffeted by the waves, so it couldn't really go forward because the waves were splashing the boat back and forth, so it's just kind of stuck there. Verse 25, shortly before dawn, so probably at 2 or 3 in the morning, Jesus went out to them walking on the lake. So right away we see Jesus just walking on the lake. That's something we can't do. So that would be something that would be scary to see, and we see that in verse 26 and 27. When the disciples saw him walking on the lake, they were terrified. It's a ghost, they said, and cried out in fear. So they're like, nobody can walk on water. What is going on? But Jesus immediately gave them comfort in verse 27. But Jesus immediately said to them, "Take courage, it is I. Don't be afraid." When the disciples faced a dangerous storm, Jesus came and calmed their fears. So it wasn't like Jesus was just floating over the waves. He had the power to actually have his feet on the water and walk over it like we would on any piece of land. How did Peter doubt Jesus' power? We keep reading in verse 28. "Lord, if it's you," Peter replied, "tell me to come to you on the water." So Jesus, "Come," he said. Then Peter got out of the boat, walked on the water, and came toward Jesus. So now is it not just Jesus walking on water? Jesus gave Peter the power to walk on water. But when he saw the wind, he was afraid and began to sink, cried out, "Lord, save me." So he is able to walk on the water, and it wasn't that Jesus stopped allowing him, but Peter became afraid and didn't trust Jesus. Jesus' power let Peter walk on water, but then Peter doubted and began to sink. So you see him starting to walk out, and he looked around at all those waves, became scared, and then he started to sink. How did Jesus show his disciples more of his power? Immediately, reading in verse 31, immediately Jesus reached out his hand and caught him. "You of little faith," he said, "why did you doubt?" So Jesus kind of called out Peter, "Why did you doubt me? I would have kept you safe." Then we see in verse 32, "And when they climbed into the boat, the wind died down." So again, we see another miracle, Jesus calming a storm. And this is the second time we've actually seen Jesus calm a storm. We're also going to look at John 6, verse 21. And it says, "Then they were willing to take him into the boat, and immediately the boat reached the shore where they were heading." So not only did the storm come, they reached the shore even though they had just been stuck in one spot. They reached the shore and the storm was calm. We'll go back to Matthew and we see the disciples' response in verse 33. "Then those who were in the boat worshipped him, saying, 'Truly you are the Son of God.'" Jesus rescued Peter, made the wind stop, and took the boat to shore. So there's really 3 miracles that the disciples saw that day. So he took them out of the water and took that boat straight to shore. Jesus taught Peter and the other disciples to trust in him in times of trouble. And what a great reminder for us that Jesus took care of the disciples and they were able to trust him. And still today, we don't get to see Jesus the same way the disciples did, but we can still trust in him in times of trouble. All right, going into our worksheet, we have a sheet that says Jesus teaches trust. It says, how did Jesus teach his disciples to trust him when they were in trouble? Fill in the blanks. Jesus blank on blank to his disciples during a storm. We see in this picture what he did. He walked on water. While he was there, this is when he first got out. The disciples thought he was a ghost, but Jesus said, "Take blank, it is I. Don't be afraid." He told them to take courage. It is I. Don't be afraid. Jesus let blank walk on water. That would be who is with him. That's Peter. Jesus rescued Peter when he blank and began to blink. So when he doubted, he began to sink. Jesus quieted the storm. Jesus put the boat immediately on the blank. He took it immediately to the shore. Jesus wants us to blank him whenever we're in trouble. And that would be the word trust. This whole story is about trust. Number 8, 9, and 10 are ones that you will be doing on your own. It says, name a fear you have in your life. There's a lot of things. It might be something you're physically scared of. It might be something that is emotionally you're scared of. But name a fear you have in life. Name a trouble you have in life. So something that's maybe going wrong in your life right now. And then write a prayer asking Jesus to help you. Then you're going to be all set on the back side. This is going to be extra credit. You can read through the directions. If you would like to complete this side, I will give you extra credit for that. If not, you are set to go on this lesson and just finish up these last 3.